Margaret Hartwell's hands shook as she tore the telegram into pieces. 4 days. 4 days of waiting in the Montana cold while the man who'd promised her everything vanished like smoke. Her last $43 couldn't buy passage home, couldn't buy food for more than a week, couldn't buy back her dignity. The station master watched from his window, pity mixing with contempt. She'd come west believing in pretty words. She'd stay because she had nowhere else to go. Then hoofbeats cut through the wind. Before we continue, I need to ask you something. If this story moves you, if Margaret's pain feels real, hit that subscribe button. Stay with me until the very end. And comment with your city below so I can see how far her journey travels across the world. Because what happens next, it changed everything. Clayton Station, Montana Territory, December 1879. The cold came first. Not the gentle chill of Philadelphia winters, where snow fell soft and carriages still ran on schedule. This was Montana cold, the kind that found every gap in your clothes, every crack in your resolve, every lie you'd told yourself about being prepared. Margaret stood at the window of Clayton Station, watching snow bury the road. 4 days ago that road had brought her here. 4 days ago she'd believed Victor Thorne would be waiting. Miss Hartwell, she turned. Ezra Horn, the station master, held a cup of coffee. Steam rose between them. You should drink this. I'm fine. You ain't fine. You've been standing at that window since dawn. Margaret took the cup. Her fingers were numb. She hadn't noticed. The evening stage. Ain't running. Ezra's voice was kind but firm. Snow's too heavy. Won't clear for days, maybe a week. I see. Miss Hartwell, I got to ask. You got money for lodging? Margaret's throat tightened. Some. How much is some enough? Ezra studied her face. He'd seen this before, Eastern women arriving with hope, leaving with nothing. There's a boarding house 2 miles south. Mrs. Henderson takes in, I said I'm fine. The words came out sharp. Ezra stepped back. Yes, ma'am. I'll leave you be. He retreated to his office. Margaret watched him go, shame burning through the cold. He was trying to help. She'd snapped at him like a cornered animal, because that's what she was now. Cornered. She returned to the window. The bench outside her bench, she'd started thinking of it, sat empty. 4 days of sitting there waiting for a man who would never come. The wood held the memory of her body, a shallow depression where hope had died by degrees. Day 1. He's delayed. Weather. Business. Something reasonable. Day 2. Maybe the telegram didn't reach him. Maybe he's on his way. Day 3. Something's wrong. Something's happened. Day 4. He was never real. Margaret pulled the letters from her pocket, 23 of them carefully preserved. She'd read them so many times the paper had gone soft, the ink beginning to fade. My dearest Margaret, the ranch is nearly ready. I count the days until you arrive. The mountains here are beautiful, but not half so beautiful as the future we'll build together. I've purchased new furniture. A writing desk for you positioned by the window. You'll have morning light for your correspondence. Lies. All of it. The writing desk didn't exist. The ranch didn't exist. Victor Thorne himself might not exist. Not the man she'd imagined anyway. Somewhere out there was a con artist using that name, using her loneliness, using her money. $800. Her entire inheritance. She'd wired it 3 weeks ago for urgent repairs. Victor had been so apologetic, so embarrassed to ask, so grateful when she'd insisted. Margaret laughed. The sound came out broken. The door opened. Cold wind rushed in, along with a woman Margaret had seen around the station, Mrs. Delacroix, traveling to Butte. Dreadful weather. Mrs. Delacroix stamped snow from her boots. They're saying the pass is closed. We could be stuck here for days. So I've heard. You're the young lady waiting for someone, aren't you? The station master mentioned. He's not coming. The words felt strange in her mouth. Final. Mrs. Delacroix's expression shifted to practiced sympathy. "Oh, my dear, I'm so sorry. Is there family you can wire? Someone who might—" "No." "Friends, perhaps?" "No." Margaret turned back to the window. She felt Mrs. Delacroix hovering, wanting to help, not knowing how. Finally, the woman retreated to the waiting area. Margaret pressed her forehead against the cold glass. No family. Her parents had died of fever when she was 19 7 years ago now. No siblings. The cousins back in Boston had made their feelings clear when she'd announced her plans, foolish, reckless, unseemly. They'd been right. No friends either. Not real ones. Philadelphia society had acquaintances, dinner companions, church groups. But when she'd sold her house and announced her departure, those connections had evaporated. Women whispered. Men looked at her differently. She'd become a curiosity, then a caution, then a ghost. "Did you hear about Margaret Hartwell going west to marry a rancher she's never met? Can you imagine?" She could imagine. She'd done it. The door to Ezra's office opened. He emerged with a ledger. "Miss Hartwell, I hate to press, but I need to settle accounts. You've been taking meals here 4 days now, and the room—" "I don't have a room." "You've been sleeping on the bench." It wasn't a question. Margaret's face burned. "I'll pay for the meals." She reached for her reticule. "How much?" $2. She counted out coins. $41 left. Ezra took the money, but his expression was troubled. "Miss, you can't sleep outside. Not in this cold. You'll freeze." "I'll manage." "That ain't managing. That's dying slow." Margaret's composure cracked. "Then what would you have me do? I have $41. Boarding costs $1 a day. That gives me 6 weeks if I don't eat. Where exactly should I go, Mr. Horn?" The outburst drew attention. Mrs. Delacroix stared. 2 cowboys by the stove stopped talking. Ezra lowered his voice. "I got a storage room out back. Ain't much, but it's warm. You could—" "I don't need charity." "It ain't charity if you work for it. I could use help with cleaning, organizing supplies. You'd earn your keep." Pride warred with desperation. Margaret wanted to refuse, wanted to stand tall and walk out with her dignity intact. But dignity didn't keep you warm at night. What hours? Dawn to dusk, 6 days a week. And lodging. Storage room's yours. I'll bring a cot. Meals included if you cook for yourself using kitchen supplies. It was more than fair. More than she deserved. "When do I start?" "Tomorrow's soon enough. Tonight take the room. Consider it an advance." Margaret nodded, not trusting her voice. Ezra retrieved a key. "Through that door down the hall, last room on the left. Ain't fancy, but the stove works." She took the key. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. You ain't seen the storage system. It's a nightmare." He was trying to make her smile. Margaret appreciated the effort, even if she couldn't quite manage it. She collected her trunk and dragged it down the hall. The room was small, barely 8 feet square, with a cot, a chair, and a pot-belly stove. But it was warm, private, safe. Margaret sat on the cot and allowed herself 1 minute of tears. Just one. Then she wiped her eyes, unpacked her few belongings, and forced herself to eat the bread and cheese she'd been saving. Tomorrow, she'd start over. Again. Tomorrow, she'd figure out how to survive in a territory that didn't want her, with skills no one needed, and a broken heart nobody cared about. Tomorrow. Tonight, she just needed to make it through the dark. Oh. The next morning, Margaret woke before dawn, habit from years of managing her own household. The stove had gone cold. Her breath misted in the frigid air. She dressed in her most practical clothing, a wool skirt, sturdy blouse, and the warmest shawl she owned. Her fine dresses stayed in the trunk. She wouldn't need them for cleaning storage rooms. Ezra was already awake, brewing coffee. "Morning, you want some?" "Please." He poured her a cup. "You sleep all right?" "Well enough." "Good, 'cause we got work ahead of us." He gestured toward a door Margaret hadn't noticed before. "That's the storage room. Ain't been organized proper in 5 years. Supplies just get thrown in as they arrive. I can't never find nothing. Margaret opened the door. The room was chaos. Crates stacked haphazardly, sacks of flour and beans piled in corners, tools mixed with dishes mixed with fabric bolts. No system, no logic. It was perfect. I'll need paper, Margaret said, and a pencil. I'll create an inventory, then we'll reorganize by category and frequency of use. Ezra blinked. You done this before? I managed my own household in Philadelphia for 7 years. I know how to organize supplies. Well, all right then. He retrieved paper and pencil. Have at it. Margaret rolled up her sleeves and got to work. The task was enormous. Hours passed as she counted, categorized, and documented. Her back ached. Her hands grew filthy. But her mind was clear for the first time in days. Numbers didn't lie. Categories made sense. Organization was logical, predictable, safe. By midday, she'd completed the inventory. By evening, she'd reorganized half the room. Ezra checked on her periodically, increasingly impressed. Miss Hartwell, this is remarkable. I can actually find things now. It's basic accounting principles. Everything has a place. Maybe to you. To me, it's like watching magic. Margaret allowed herself a small smile. It's not magic. It's just attention to detail. Well, whatever it is, I'm grateful. Ezra paused. I got to ask, why's a woman with your skills come west to marry a stranger? You could have found work in Philadelphia, managed a household, made a good living. The question stung, but it was fair. Because I was lonely, Margaret said quietly. And stupid. I thought a husband would fill the empty spaces. I thought love could be built on letters and shared interests. Plenty of folks come west for worse reasons. That doesn't make me less foolish. Don't make you foolish at all. Makes you human. Margaret returned to her work, unwilling to continue the conversation. But Ezra's words stayed with her. Human. She'd been trying so hard to be perfect, careful, prudent, sensible. Never impulsive, never reckless. And it hadn't mattered. She'd still ended up here, broke and alone. Maybe being human meant accepting that you couldn't control everything. That sometimes you made mistakes. That survival meant adapting, not perfecting. She was still thinking about this when the door opened and cold wind rushed in. Footsteps, heavy boots on wood floor. Ezra, you in here? The voice was male, deep with a western drawl that marked him as local. Yeah, Ben. What brings you out in this weather? Margaret peered through the storage room door. A man stood in the main room, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a long duster coat and a wide-brimmed hat. Snow dusted his shoulders. Looking for information. You had any women come through here last week? Traveling alone, Eastern clothes, expecting to meet someone? Margaret's heart stopped. Ezra glanced toward the storage room. Why you asking? I'm tracking a man. Con artist. He lures women west with promises, takes their money, disappears. I got reason to believe he set up a meeting here. What's the name? He uses different names. Most recent was Victor Thorne. Margaret stepped out of the storage room. Both men turned. You know that name. The stranger. Ben studied her with sharp gray eyes. I was supposed to marry him, Margaret said. Her voice didn't shake. She was proud of that. He never showed up. Ben's expression shifted, anger mixed with something like pity. How much did he take? $800. Jesus. He removed his hat. I'm sorry, ma'am. I know that don't help, but I am. Who are you? Name's Benjamin Sawyer. I'm a bounty hunter. Been tracking Victor Thorne, or whatever his real name is, for 5 years. Why? What did he do to you? Ben's jaw tightened. He conned my wife while I was away on a cavalry scout. Took everything we had. When I came home, Anna was dead. Bandits had attacked our place, thought we had money, because Anna had bought herself new dresses, trying to feel better about being fooled. The grief in his voice was old, but not healed. She died because she was ashamed to tell me what happened, Ben continued. Because she thought I'd blame her. Because a con man made her believe she was worthless. Margaret felt something crack open inside her. Your wife, did she have family? Someone who could help? We had a daughter, Rose, 4 years old. Ben's voice went flat. She died too. Same attack. The room went silent. I'm sorry, Margaret whispered. Everyone's sorry. Don't change nothing. Ben turned back to Ezra. So this is the most recent victim. You know if Thorne came through here at all? Never saw him. Just Miss Hartwell waiting. That tracks. He never shows in person. Too risky. Ben looked at Margaret. You got his letters? Yes. Can I see them? Margaret retrieved her reticule and handed over the carefully preserved correspondence. Ben read through them quickly, his expression darkening. This is his work, same style, same phrases. Counting the days. Future will build. Man's a poet when he's stealing. Can you catch him? Margaret asked. I've caught him twice before. Both times his lawyers got the charges dropped. Turns out con games are hard to prosecute when there's no physical theft, just gifts and misunderstandings. So he just keeps doing this. 23 women that I know of, probably more. The number hit Margaret like a fist. 23. You ain't alone in this. That help any? No. Margaret took the letters back. But it makes me angry, and anger is better than shame. Ben studied her with new respect. You got somewhere to stay, someone looking after you. I'm working here. Mr. Horn has given me lodging. That's good. That's smart. He turned to Ezra. She gives you any trouble, you let me know. She ain't trouble. Best worker I've had in years. Ben nodded, then looked back at Margaret. Ma'am, I know this ain't much comfort, but I'm gonna catch him. Maybe not today, maybe not next month, but I will. And when I do, I'll make sure every woman he hurt knows justice got served. Will you kill him? The question came out before Margaret could stop it. Ben's expression went cold. I'll bring him in legal. What happens after that, that's up to the courts. It wasn't quite an answer. He put his hat back on, tipped it to her. Miss Hartwell, Ezra. Then he was gone back into the snow. Margaret stood frozen. Ezra let out a low whistle. That's Ben Sawyer. He's got a reputation. Fair but hard. When he says he'll catch someone, he means it. Has he been hunting Victor for 5 years? That's what he said. Then Victor must be very good at running. Or very smart. Smart enough to stay ahead of a man like Ben. Margaret returned to the storage room, but her hands shook as she sorted supplies. Ben Sawyer's story had unlocked something inside her, not just sympathy, but kinship. They'd both lost something to Victor Thorne. Different things, but the loss was real. And if Ben had been hunting for 5 years without catching him, what hope did Margaret have for justice? None. The realization should have broken her. Instead, it clarified things. She couldn't count on justice. Couldn't count on anyone else to fix this. She had $41 a storage room and skills no one valued. That's what she had to work with. So she'd work with it. She finished organizing the storage room as darkness fell. Ezra brought her dinner stew and bread. You did good today, he said. Real good. Thank you. Ben Sawyer showing up like that, I imagine that's hard hearing about all them other women. It's clarifying. I thought I was special. Turns out I'm just number 24. That don't make what happened to you less wrong. Margaret ate slowly, thinking. Mr. Horn, how often does Ben come through here? Every few months usually. He's got a ranch about 10 miles north, runs cattle, breaks horses, does bounty work when the trail gets hot. Is he good at it? The bounty work. One of the best. Why? Just curious. But it wasn't curiosity. It was calculation. Ben Sawyer had resources, skills, motivation. He'd been tracking Victor for 5 years. Margaret had information organization skills and $41. Separately, they had nothing. Together they might have a chance. 3 days later, Margaret fell into a rhythm. Wake before dawn. Work until dusk. Sleep in the storage room. Repeat. The work was mindless, which helped. Cleaning, organizing, occasionally serving food to travelers. Nothing that required thought. Her mind was busy elsewhere planning. She'd read through Victor's letters a dozen more times looking for patterns. Postmark locations, dates, phrases that repeated. She created a timeline cross-referencing with things Ben had mentioned. Victor moved in circuits, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado. Never the same town twice within a year. Always small places with mail service, but no telegraph office nearby. He was careful, methodical, but everyone made mistakes. On the third day, hoofbeats approached the station. Margaret looked up from scrubbing the floor. Through the window she saw Ben Sawyer dismounting. Her heart rate picked up. He entered snow dusting his coat. Ezra. Ben, twice in 1 week. You training up residents. Got business nearby, thought I'd check on the lady. His eyes found Margaret. Miss Hartwell. Mr. Sawyer. You settling in all right? As well as can be expected. He nodded, started to leave, then paused. Actually, I wanted to ask, did Thorne ever mention specific locations in his letters? Towns, landmarks, anything? Margaret stood wiping her hands on her apron. No, he was deliberately vague. The ranch, the mountains, the territory, nothing concrete. That's his pattern, makes him impossible to track. Unless you know what to look for. Ben's eyes sharpened. What do you mean? Margaret retrieved her carefully organized notes. I've been analyzing the letters. He never mentions locations, but he does mention seasons, planting schedules, harvest times, weather patterns. So each region has different agricultural cycles. The details he includes suggest he was actually in Wyoming when he wrote the early letters Montana, for the middle ones Colorado, for the recent ones. Ben took the notes, scanning them. This is good work. It gets better. Look at the postmarks. She showed him her timeline. The letters were always mailed from small towns, but the postmark dates don't align with when I received them. There's a 3 to 5 day delay. Meaning he wasn't in those towns when he mailed them. Meaning someone else mailed them for him. He has accomplices managing his correspondence. Ben stared at her. How did you figure this out? I'm an accountant. I see patterns. You're more than an accountant. He studied her notes with growing respect. This changes things. If we can identify the accomplices, we can track back to Victor. Exactly. Margaret took a breath. I want to help. Ma'am, my name is Margaret, and I'm not asking for permission. I'm offering my skills in exchange for a chance at justice. Ben shook his head. This ain't work for a woman, is that what you were going to say? For someone without training, man or woman. Then train me. Miss Hart Margaret. This is dangerous. Thorne's a predator. He's hurt people, killed people indirectly. My wife, my daughter. I know, and I'm sorry for your loss, but he hurt me too. Took my money, my future, my dignity. I'm not asking to face him in a gunfight. I'm asking to use my mind to track him down. Ben was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with something. You got somewhere better to be? He finally asked. I have a storage room and $41, so no. You'd be willing to leave that behind, work for free, just for the chance to help catch him? Yes. Why, most women just want to forget and move on. Margaret thought about that, about the shame she'd carried, the humiliation, about 23 other women carrying the same burden. Because forgetting means he wins, because moving on means accepting that what happened to me doesn't matter. And it does matter. I matter. Your wife mattered. All 23 of us matter. Ben's expression shifted, something hard and determined settling into place. All right, here's the deal. I got a ranch 10 miles north. Small operation, but I need someone to manage the books while I'm out tracking. You do that, I'll teach you what I know about investigation. No promises, no guarantees, just work. And when we find him? When we find him, I bring him in legal. You testify. We make sure he never hurts another woman." Margaret extended her hand. "Deal." Ben shook it. His grip was strong, calloused. "We leave at first light." "I'll be ready." That night, Margaret lay awake in her storage room, listening to wind howl outside. She was about to ride off into the Montana wilderness, with a man she barely knew abandoning the safety of Ezra's charity for the uncertain promise of revenge. It was reckless, dangerous, exactly the kind of impulsive decision that had brought her west in the first place. But this time felt different. This time she wasn't running toward a fantasy. She was running toward something real: justice, purpose, maybe even healing. And she wasn't running alone. Outside, snow continued falling, burying the roads, erasing paths, making the world new. Tomorrow, Margaret Hartwell would begin again. Not as a victim waiting to be saved, as a hunter learning to track her prey. Dawn came cold and merciless. Margaret woke to the sound of horses outside, 2 of them from the rhythm of hooves on frozen ground. She dressed quickly in the dim light, her fingers clumsy with cold and nerves. Everything she owned fit in one trunk. That should have felt sad, but instead it felt like freedom. No furniture to worry about, no house to maintain, no possessions tying her to a life that had already ended. She dragged the trunk into the main room. Ben stood by the door speaking quietly with Ezra. Both men turned as she approached. "You sure about this?" Ezra asked. "I'm sure. If it don't work out, you got a job here. Always." The kindness in his voice made Margaret's throat tight. "Thank you. For everything." Ezra nodded, then handed her a package wrapped in cloth. "Food for the road. And this." He pressed coins into her hand. "Your wages for the week. You earned it." Margaret tried to refuse, but he closed her fingers around the money. "Take it. You ain't charity, remember you worked." She pocketed the coins. $43 now. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Ben lifted her trunk like it weighed nothing and secured it to the pack horse. "You ever ridden before?" "Some, not extensively." "Can you handle a full day in the saddle?" "I'll manage." "That ain't an answer." "It's the only answer I have." Ben's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. "Fair enough. This here's Lady." He gestured to a dappled gray mare. "She's gentle. Just hold the reins steady and let her follow my horse." Margaret approached the mare carefully. The horse turned to look at her with dark, intelligent eyes. "Hello, Lady." She stroked the mare's neck. The animal was warm, solid, real. "We're going to be friends, you and I." Ben helped her mount. Margaret settled into the saddle, adjusting her skirts. The ground suddenly seemed very far away. "You all right?" "I will be." They rode out as the sun broke over the eastern mountains, painting the snow gold and pink. The beauty of it caught Margaret off guard, how something so cold could look so warm. The first hour was difficult. Her thighs ached. Her back protested. The saddle felt wrong no matter how she shifted. But she didn't complain. Ben rode ahead in silence, and Margaret focused on staying mounted. By the second hour, her body found a rhythm. The mare's gait became predictable. The pain settled into a steady ache she could ignore. "You're doing good," Ben called back. "I'm not doing anything. The horse is doing all the work. Staying in the saddle is work. Trust me." They stopped at midday to rest the horses. Ben produced jerky and hardtack from his saddlebag. "It ain't fancy. It's food. That makes it fancy enough." They ate in silence, sitting on a fallen log. The snow around them was pristine, unmarked. The only sounds were wind through pine trees and the horses breathing. "Can I ask you something?" Margaret finally said. "Depends what you're asking." "Your wife, Anna. What was she like?" Ben's jaw tightened. "Why you want to know?" "Because you've been hunting her killer for 5 years. That's not just duty. That's love. He was quiet so long Margaret thought he wouldn't answer. Then quietly. She was smart, sharp as a tack, used to keep the ranch books, handle all the correspondence with buyers. I was just the muscle, she was the brain. Like us, Margaret said without thinking. Ben glanced at her. Maybe. Anna could read people, though. Knew when someone was lying just by watching their face. That's how I knew something was wrong when I came home. She couldn't look at me. Because she was ashamed. Because he'd convinced her it was her fault. That's what Thorne does. He don't just steal money. He steals your ability to trust yourself. Margaret understood that intimately. Did you ever find out how he approached her? Letters. Same as you. Claimed to be a livestock broker in Denver. Said he could get us better prices if we'd send him samples and a deposit for shipping. And she believed him. We needed better prices. The ranch was struggling. Anna was trying to help. His voice went rough. She was trying to save us. It's not your fault. I know that. Don't make it easier. They rode on. The terrain grew rougher, hills gave way to mountains, trees closing in on both sides. The path narrowed until they rode single-file, Lady following Ben's stallion with patient trust. Margaret's mind wandered to Philadelphia, to the life she'd left. Her small house with the blue door. The church group that met Thursdays. The library where she'd spent Sunday afternoons. All of it seemed distant now, like a story someone else had lived. You got people back east? Ben asked, as if reading her thoughts. No one who matters. That's a hard thing to say about family. It's true, though. My cousins made it clear I was an embarrassment. Haven't heard from them since I left. Their loss. The simple statement hit harder than elaborate sympathy. Margaret blinked against sudden tears. What about you? You have family. Brother in California. We ain't close. Parents died when I was young. Fever took them both same week. I'm sorry. Long time ago. Doesn't make it easier. Ben looked back at her, something like recognition in his eyes. No, it don't. They reached the ranch as the sun began its descent. Margaret had been expecting something grand. Victor's letters had described sprawling ranches with dozens of hands. But Ben's place was modest. A single-story house, weathered but solid. A barn that had seen better days. Corrals holding maybe 20 horses. It ain't much, Ben said, dismounting. It's honest. That's more than most places can claim. A man emerged from the barn, older, gray-bearded, moving with the careful precision of someone whose joints hurt in the cold. Boss, didn't expect you back so soon. Plans changed. Silas, this is Margaret Hartwell. She'll be staying in the guest room handling the books. Silas studied Margaret with sharp eyes. That right? We hiring accountants now. We're partnering with one. Miss Hartwell has information about Victor Thorne. The older man's expression shifted. I see. Ma'am. He tipped his hat. Welcome to Sawyer Ranch. It ain't fancy, but the stove works and the roof don't leak much. That's more than I had yesterday. Silas grunted approval. I'll see to the horses. You show her around. Ben led Margaret to the house. Inside was sparse, but clean, a main room serving as kitchen and living area, a bedroom off to the left, and a ladder leading to a loft. That's my room. Ben gestured to the bedroom. You'll be in there. He opened a door Margaret hadn't noticed, revealing a small space with a narrow bed and a washstand. It ain't much. It's private, it's warm, it's more than enough. There's a desk in the barn. That's where I keep the ranch ledgers. You can work there or bring them in here if you prefer. The barn is fine. Ben nodded, looking uncomfortable. I'll let you settle in. Supper's at sundown. Nothing fancy. You keep saying that. Nothing's fancy. I don't need fancy, Ben. I need real. He met her eyes. Real I can do. After he left, Margaret sat on the bed and allowed herself a moment to simply breathe. Her body ached from the ride. Her mind was spinning with everything that had happened in the last week. But underneath it all was something unexpected, a sense of purpose. She wasn't waiting anymore. Wasn't hoping for rescue. She was acting, choosing, moving forward. It felt terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. She unpacked her few belongings, then ventured outside. The barn was warmer than expected, heated by the horses and thick walls. She found the office tucked in a corner, a desk buried under papers exactly as Ben had described. Margaret rolled up her sleeves and began sorting. Bills, receipts, correspondence with buyers. No system whatsoever. Just papers stacked wherever they'd landed. It took her an hour to create basic categories. Another hour to realize Ben had been underselling the chaos. The man was brilliant at ranching and terrible at paperwork. She was deep in a particularly confusing ledger entry when Silas appeared in the doorway. "Boss said you were good with numbers. I can usually make sense of them. This, though," she gestured at the desk. "This is impressive chaos. Ben's got a mind for horses and tracking. Everything else is just details. Details matter. That's what Anna used to say." Silas's voice softened. "You remind me of her. Not in looks, but in the way you carry yourself. Like you're holding yourself together through sheer stubbornness." Margaret looked up. "Is that a compliment?" "It's an observation. Anna was stubborn as a mule. Kept the ranch running when Ben was off scouting. Kept him grounded when the rage got too heavy." He paused. "She'd have liked you." "You don't know that. I know Ben brought you here. He don't trust easy. If he's letting you into his hunt, you earned it somehow." After Silas left, Margaret returned to the ledgers with renewed focus. She needed to understand the ranch operations, needed to prove her worth. But more than that, she needed to understand Ben, what drove him, what haunted him, what made a man spend 5 years hunting a ghost. Supper was simple venison stew and biscuits. They ate at a rough-hewn table, the three of them. "This is good," Margaret said. "Don't lie." Ben's tone was dry. "Silas cooks like everything needs to be punished." "I cook like a ranch hand," Silas corrected. "Ain't trying to win prizes." Then mission accomplished. Despite the terrible food, Margaret found herself almost smiling. There was an ease between these two men, a comfort born of long familiarity. She'd never had that, never had anyone who knew her well enough to tease without cruelty. "I started organizing the ledgers," she said. "It's going to take a few days to sort everything properly." "Take whatever time you need." "Some of these entries go back 3 years. You haven't filed taxes." Ben and Silas exchanged glances. "Define filed," Ben said. Margaret stared. "You haven't filed taxes in 3 years. Been busy." Busy is not an excuse recognized by the territorial government. "They ain't complained yet." "Because they haven't caught you yet. Ben, this is—" She stopped seeing his expression. "You know this is a problem." "I know, just haven't had time to deal with it." "Well, now you have someone who can. I'll need to see all your financial records, purchase receipts, sale documentation. It's all in the barn, somewhere." Margaret closed her eyes, counting to 10. "This is going to take longer than a few days. You got somewhere else to be." "No. But I should charge you extra for this disaster." "Thought you were working for room and board." "I'm reconsidering my terms." Silas laughed, a rusty sound like he didn't do it often. "I like her, boss. She's got spine." That night, Margaret lay in her small room, listening to unfamiliar sounds. Horses shifting in the barn, wind rattling window panes, the crack and settle of wood cooling in winter air. Philadelphia had been quiet at night, the muffled silence of a city that slept behind thick walls. This was different. Wild. Alive in ways that should have frightened her, but somehow didn't. She thought about Ben in the next room, probably lying awake too. Both of them haunted by the same ghost hunting the same prey. It should have been uncomfortable, this forced partnership. But instead, it felt like the first honest thing that had happened to her in months. No pretty lies, no false promises. Just work and purpose, and the cold clarity of shared rage. Margaret fell asleep planning her attack on the ledgers, her mind already organizing categories, creating systems, bringing order to Ben's beautiful chaos. The next morning she woke to voices outside. Ben and Silas arguing about something. She dressed quickly and emerged to find them standing by the corral, tension clear in their postures. "I'm just saying you could have given me warning," Silas was saying. "Didn't have time. It happened fast." "Everything with you happens fast. You ever think about slowing down, thinking things through?" "I've been thinking for 5 years. Time for action." "Action gets people killed." Margaret cleared her throat. Both men turned. "Sorry," she said. "Should I come back?" "No." Ben's voice was tight. Silas was just leaving. The older man shot Ben a look, then stalked toward the barn. Margaret waited until he was out of earshot. "What was that about?" "Nothing. Ranch business." "It didn't sound like nothing." Ben's jaw worked. "Silas thinks I'm using you, that I brought you here as bait." Margaret's stomach dropped. "Am I bait?" "No." The word was sharp. "You're here because you have skills I need and information that might help. That's it." "But if Victor found out I was here..." "He won't. We're being careful." "Are we?" "Because I left a trail from Clayton Station to this ranch. If he has people watching..." "He don't watch women he's already conned. He moves on. You're old news to him." The casual cruelty of that truth stung. Margaret turned away, not wanting Ben to see her face. "Hey." His voice softened. "I didn't mean it like that." "Yes, you did. And you're right. I'm not important enough for him to track. I was just another fool who believed his lies." "Margaret, I should get to work. Those ledgers won't organize themselves." She walked to the barn before he could respond. Inside, she sat at the desk and stared at the papers without seeing them. Old news, used up, discarded. That's what she was to Victor. A transaction completed. A resource extracted. The rage that thought sparked was clean and bright. She grabbed a pencil and began working with savage focus, channeling fury into numbers and categories. Hours passed. The barn grew colder. Margaret's fingers cramped, but she didn't stop. She was deep in a particularly tangled set of purchase orders when Ben appeared. "You missed lunch." "Not hungry." "You need to eat." "I need to finish this." Ben studied her hunched shoulders, the tight set of her jaw. "You mad at me or at him?" "Both." "Fair." He set a plate beside her. "Eat anyway. Can't work if you pass out." Margaret ignored him until her stomach growled, betraying her. She grabbed the bread and ate mechanically, not tasting it. "I shouldn't have said that, about you being old news." "Why not?" "It's true." "True don't mean kind." "I don't need kindness. I need honesty." Ben pulled up a crate and sat. "All right. Honest truth. You scare me." Margaret looked up, startled. "What?" "You're smart, capable, and angry. That's a dangerous combination. I brought you here thinking you'd help with paperwork, maybe provide some information. But you're not just helping, you're hunting, and I don't know how to handle that. So what you want me to sit quiet and be grateful? I want you to be safe. That's different. Safe means being careful. Careful means moving slow. Moving slow means he hurts more women while we waste time. And rushing means we make mistakes. Mistakes get people killed." Margaret set down her pencil. "Is that what happened to your wife?" "A mistake." Ben's face went hard. "Don't." "You said Thorne conned her, but the bandits killed her. How does that connect?" "It don't matter. It matters if you're letting guilt drive your decisions." Ben stood abruptly. "You don't know nothing about my decisions." "Then tell me. Help me understand why we're doing this slow when every day he's out there is another day some woman is reading his lies and believing them." "Because I already lost people to my rage." The words exploded out of him. Because I came home and found Anna dead, and Rose dead, and the ranch burned, and all I could think was, if I'd been here, if I'd stayed, instead of taking that last scout, if I'd been the man she needed, instead of chasing money and glory. He stopped breathing hard. Margaret stood slowly. That's not what happened. You were working, providing, being a husband and father. I was gone. That's what matters. I was gone and she was ashamed, and she didn't tell me because she thought I'd blame her. What kind of husband makes his wife feel that way? The kind whose wife loved him enough to want to protect him from worry. Ben shook his head. You don't understand. I understand that Thorne is good at finding the vulnerable places in people. He found mine loneliness and fear of being alone forever. He found Anna's wanting to save the ranch and make you proud. That's not your fault. Feels like it. I know. I feel like it's my fault too. That if I'd been smarter, less desperate, more suspicious. But Ben, that's what he wants. He wants us blaming ourselves instead of him. They stood in the cold barn breath misting between them. Silas is right, Ben finally said. I am using you. Not as bait, but as a way to not feel so alone in this. 5 years I've been hunting him by myself, and it's been eating me alive. Then you show up with your neat handwriting and your organized mind, and suddenly, I'm not alone anymore. Is that wrong? Don't know. Feels selfish. Margaret considered that. What if we're using each other? You get help with your hunt. I get purpose and a chance at justice. That's partnership, not exploitation. You really see it that way. I see that we both want the same thing, and we're both smart enough to know we have better odds together. Ben almost smiled. When you put it like that, it sounds reasonable. That's because it is reasonable. Anna used to do that too, make the complicated sound simple. I'm not trying to replace her. I know, but you remind me that decent people exist. Been hard to remember that lately. They returned to work. Then the tension eased, if not fully resolved. Margaret tackled the ledgers with renewed focus while Ben worked on repairing tack nearby. The silence between them was comfortable now, punctuated by the scratch of her pencil and the squeak of leather under his hands. Can I ask you something? Margaret said eventually. Long as it ain't about feelings. How do you track someone who doesn't want to be found? Ben looked up. You look for patterns. Places they go, things they need, mistakes they make. Everyone has patterns. What's Victor's pattern? He works in circuits, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado. Takes him about 2 years to complete a full circle. Never hits the same town twice in that time frame. But after 2 years he comes back. Sometimes. He's adaptable. Margaret thought about that. So if we can predict where he'll be next, we can be waiting. Do you know where he is now? Not exactly, but I know his last confirmed location was Denver 3 months ago. From there, he usually heads north into Wyoming. There are dozens of towns in Wyoming. I know, that's the problem. Margaret returned to her ledgers, but her mind was elsewhere. Patterns. Everyone had patterns. Victor mailed letters from small towns but lived somewhere else. He used accomplices to manage correspondence. He moved in circuits. What else did they know? He targeted educated women. Quoted poetry. Discussed philosophy. That meant he had education himself, or at least access to books. Does he ever stay in one place? She asked. Not that I've found. But he needs books. Poetry collections, philosophy texts. Those aren't common in frontier towns. Where does he get them? Ben straightened. What are you thinking? I'm thinking a man who quotes Tennyson and Wordsworth needs access to those books, which means either he carries them unlikely if he's constantly moving, or he has a base somewhere with a library or bookstore. Most frontier towns don't have libraries. No, but cities do. Denver, Cheyenne, Salt Lake City. You think he's based in a city? I think he visits cities to resupply. Books, clothes, supplies. Things he can't get in small towns. Ben stood crossing to her desk. If that's true, we could check bookstores. See if anyone remembers a customer buying poetry collections. It's a starting point. It's more than I've had in months. He studied her with something like awe. You're good at this. I'm good at organizing information. This is just another kind of ledger. No, it's more than that. You think different from most people. Margaret felt heat rise in her cheeks. I just pay attention to details. Most people don't. That's what makes you valuable. The word valuable settled warm in her chest. Not beautiful, not accomplished, not any of the hollow compliments men usually offered. Valuable. Like she mattered beyond her appearance or her propriety. Thank you. Don't thank me. You earned it. That evening they gathered around the table again, Margaret, Ben, and Silas. The tension from the morning had dissipated, replaced by cautious optimism. Tell him your theory, Ben said. Margaret explained her thinking about the books about cities as supply points. Silas listened carefully. Makes sense, he said finally. Man like that needs to maintain appearances. Can't do that living rough. So where do we start? Margaret asked. Denver, Ben said. It's the biggest city in the region, and I know he was there 3 months ago. We can check bookstores, haberdashers, any place a well-dressed man might shop. When do we leave? We don't. I go to Denver. You stay here. Margaret's temper flared. Absolutely not. It's too dangerous. You said I wasn't bait. Was that a lie? No, but... Then I'm coming. Those letters were addressed to me. I know how he thinks, what appeals to him. You need me there. Ben looked at Silas, who shrugged. She's got a point. Whose side are you on? The side that makes sense. If she can identify his taste in books, that's useful. And honestly, boss, you need someone to keep you from doing something stupid. I don't do stupid things. Both Silas and Margaret stared at him. Often, Ben amended. I don't do stupid things often. We leave in 3 days, Margaret said, making it a statement rather than a question. That gives me time to finish the tax paperwork and organize your records. You're assuming I agreed. You did. You just don't know it yet. Ben looked at her for a long moment, then shook his head. Anna used to do that too. Decide things and inform me later. Did it work? Every damn time. After supper, Margaret stepped outside for air. The night was clear, stars sharp as broken glass against black sky. Cold bit through her shawl, but she barely noticed. Denver. She was going to Denver to hunt a man who'd destroyed her life. 3 weeks ago, she'd been sitting on a bench in Clayton Station, broken and alone. Now she was planning an investigation like it was the most natural thing in the world. The door opened behind her. Ben stepped out, pulling on his coat. You all right? Just thinking. About how different everything is now. How different I am. Ben leaned against the porch rail beside her. You ain't that different. You were always strong. You just didn't know it. I feel like a different person. Because you're not pretending anymore. Pretending takes energy. Being yourself is easier. Margaret looked at him in the starlight. Is that what you're doing? Being yourself? Trying to. It's hard after everything. Will it ever get easier? Don't know. Hope so. They stood in comfortable silence, watching stars and breathing cold air. Thank you, Margaret said quietly, for giving me this. A chance to be something other than a victim. You were never a victim. You were just waiting for the right moment to fight back. Is that what this is? Fighting back. That's exactly what it is. Margaret thought about that, about rage channeled into action, about grief transformed into purpose, about 2 damaged people finding each other in the cold and deciding that survival wasn't enough. They wanted justice, and together, maybe they could actually achieve it. 3 days, she said. I'll be ready. I know you will. They went inside, then returning to warmth and lamplight. Tomorrow would bring more work, ledgers to balance, records to organize, plans to refine. But tonight, for the first time since Victor's betrayal, Margaret felt something other than shame. She felt dangerous, and she was just getting started. 3 days passed faster than Margaret expected. She worked from dawn until her eyes burned organizing years of Ben's neglected paperwork into something the territorial government might actually accept. The numbers told stories lean years, when cattle prices dropped good years quickly, followed by unexpected expenses. A ranch held together by stubbornness and skill, not money. Silas watched her work with something like approval. "You're faster than Anna was." "I doubt that." "No, really. She was thorough, but you're thorough and quick. It's different." Margaret looked up from the ledger. "Tell me about her." "Ben won't." Silas settled onto a crate, his old bones creaking. "What you want to know? What made him love her?" She laughed. "Sounds simple, but out here laughter's rare. Anna found joy in small things, a calf-born healthy bred that rose proper, Ben coming home safe. She made the hard life feel worth living." "And their daughter?" Silas's face softened. "Rose was 4 when she died. Had her mother's laugh and her father's stubbornness. Used to follow me around the barn asking questions about everything. Why are horses' ears so big? Why does hay smell sweet? Why does the sky change colors?" He paused. "Ben ain't never talked about her, not once in 5 years. That's not healthy." "I know. But grief ain't logical. He thinks if he talks about them, he'll fall apart. So he buries it under work and hunting." Margaret thought about her own buried grief parents dead 7 years, and she still couldn't look at their photograph without her chest going tight. Maybe we're all just doing the best we can. Maybe. But the best we can do ain't always good enough. The night before they left for Denver, Margaret couldn't sleep. She lay in the small room, listening to the house settle, thinking about what came next. They were going to hunt a predator in his territory. If he discovered they were looking for him, if he had Confederates watching. She forced the thoughts away. Fear was useless. Planning was useful. She'd packed her one good dress, the one she'd planned to wear for her wedding. It hurt to look at, but it was the only thing she owned that would help her blend into Denver society. She'd need to look like a woman with money if they were going to visit bookstores and question shopkeepers. A knock on her door startled her. "Margaret, you awake?" Ben's voice quiet in the darkness. "Yes." "Can I come in?" She wrapped a shawl around her nightgown. "All right." He entered carrying a lamp. The light threw shadows across his face, making him look older, harder. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. "Keep thinking I'm making a mistake, bringing you into this." "You're not. You don't know that. Neither do you, but sitting here worrying won't change anything." Ben set the lamp on the washstand. "I need to tell you something. About Anna." Margaret waited, hardly breathing. "When I found her, she'd written me a letter. Hidden it in the stove where the bandits wouldn't find it. Took me 3 days to work up the courage to read it." "What did it say?" "That she was sorry. That she'd been fooled by a man claiming to be a livestock broker. That she'd sent him money, our money, trying to help the ranch. She said she couldn't live with the shame, but she wanted me to know it wasn't my fault." His voice cracked. "She thought I'd blame her. That's what Thorne did. He made her believe I'd see her as weak and stupid instead of brave and desperate." "Oh, Ben." "She didn't know the bandits were coming. That was just bad luck. But she died believing she'd failed me, and I can't—" He stopped fighting for control. "I can't let him do that to anyone else. Make them feel worthless. Make them doubt everything good they ever were." Margaret crossed the room and took his hands. They were rough, calloused, trembling slightly. "We're going to stop him." "You sound so sure." "I am sure. Because I know what he took from me, and I know what he took from you. And I know that we're smarter than him. He's good at manipulation, but we're good at seeing patterns. He'll make a mistake, and we'll be there." Ben looked at their joined hands. "Why ain't you afraid? Who says I'm not? You hide it better than most." I hide everything better than most. That's what being a woman alone in the world teaches you, how to pretend you're fine until you actually are. Are you fine? Margaret considered the question honestly. No, I'm angry and hurt and terrified, but I'm also more alive than I've been in years. That's worth something. Ben's thumb brushed across her knuckles, a small gesture probably unconscious, but it sent heat through her entire body. I'm glad you're here, he said quietly, even if it scares me. I'm glad I'm here too. They stood like that for a moment, hands clasped, the lamp throwing shadows around them. Then Ben pulled away, clearing his throat. We should sleep. Long ride tomorrow. Yes. He paused at the door. Margaret, don't do nothing heroic in Denver. If things go wrong, you run. Promise me. I promise. It was a lie and they both knew it. But he nodded and left anyway, taking the lamp with him. Margaret lay awake for another hour, her hands tingling where he'd touched them, her heart beating too fast. She told herself it was nerves about Denver, about the hunt. But she knew better. She was starting to care about Ben Sawyer. Not as a partner in vengeance, but as a man. A good man who'd been broken by loss and was trying to piece himself back together through purpose. That was dangerous. More dangerous than hunting Victor Thorne. But she didn't know how to stop it. They left at dawn, just the two of them. Silas would manage the ranch. Margaret wore her practical traveling clothes and carried a small bag with her good dress and the letters from Victor. Evidence if they needed it. The ride to Denver took 3 days. They traveled mostly in silence, stopping at small towns for supplies and lodging. Ben insisted on separate rooms at the boarding houses, maintaining propriety, even though they both knew people would talk anyway. A woman traveling alone with a man who wasn't her husband. That was scandal enough to ruin whatever reputation Margaret had left. She found she didn't care. Reputation was something Victor Thorne had stolen along with her money. She wasn't getting it back, so why pretend? On the second night they stayed in a town called Ashford. The boarding house was run by a widow named Mrs. Chen, who took one look at them and assumed they were married. Honeymoon trip? She asked, showing them upstairs. No, ma'am, Ben said. Just traveling on business. Of course, business. Mrs. Chen's smile said she didn't believe him. Well, your room is here, and the ladies' is next door. Supper at 6. After she left, Margaret met Ben's eyes. Should we correct her? Would it matter? She's already decided we're lying. Fair point. They ate supper in the boarding house dining room with 3 other guests, a salesman, an elderly couple, and a young woman traveling to visit family. The salesman dominated conversation, talking about his territory, his sales, his opinions on everything from politics to the weather. Margaret half listened, her attention divided between her food and the young woman across the table. She looked nervous, excited, wearing a new dress that didn't quite fit right. Visiting family, you said? Margaret asked during a pause in the salesman's monologue. Yes, ma'am. My fiancé. We've been corresponding for a year, and he finally sent money for the train ticket. The girl, she couldn't be more than 20, blushed. We're getting married next month. Margaret's stomach went cold. You've never met him? No, but his letters are so beautiful. He quotes Shakespeare and talks about building a future together. I know it sounds foolish, but it don't sound foolish. Ben interrupted, his voice harder than usual. But you should be careful. Make sure he's who he says he is before you commit to anything. The girl looked offended. He's a gentleman, a rancher with property. Why would he lie? Because some men lie for sport, Margaret said quietly. Please just be careful. Make sure there are witnesses at the wedding. Keep control of your own money. Don't send him anything before you meet in person. I already sent money. For supplies for the wedding. The girl lifted her chin. He needed help with the arrangements. Margaret and Ben exchanged glances. How much? Ben asked. I don't see how that's your concern. It's my concern because I've seen this before. Men who court women through letters, promise marriage, take their money and disappear. The girl stood abruptly. You don't know anything about us. About him. He loves me. She fled the dining room. The other guests stared at Margaret and Ben with a mixture of curiosity and disapproval. "That was well done," the salesman said dryly. "Terrifying the poor girl." "Better terrified than robbed," Ben said. Later in the hallway outside their rooms, Margaret stopped Ben. "We should follow her. Make sure she's actually meeting someone real." "We don't have time. Denver's still a day away, and Thorn's trail gets colder every hour we waste." "What if it's him? What if that girl is his next victim? What if she's not?" "We can't save every woman in the West, Margaret. We can barely save ourselves. So we just let her walk into disaster. We warned her. That's all we can do." Margaret wanted to argue, but she knew he was right. They couldn't follow every potential victim. Couldn't derail their hunt every time someone looked vulnerable. But it felt wrong. Cowardly. "I hate this," she said. "I know. Me too." They reached Denver on the third day, arriving as the sun began its descent behind the mountains. The city was bigger than Margaret expected. Buildings, 3 and 4 stories tall. Streets crowded with wagons and pedestrians, the smell of coal smoke and horses, and humanity packed tight. Ben led them to a hotel on Larimer Street. "We'll take 2 rooms. Tomorrow we start checking bookstores." The clerk at the front desk gave them the same knowing look Mrs. Chen had. Margaret ignored it, too tired to care. Her room was small but clean, with a real bed and a wash basin. Luxury compared to what she'd grown accustomed to. She changed into her good dress, pinning her hair into something resembling sophistication. The woman in the mirror looked like a stranger, thinner than before, harder around the eyes but more present somehow, more real. A knock. Ben's voice. "You ready?" She opened the door. He'd changed too, wearing a suit she didn't know he owned. He looked uncomfortable, like the clothes didn't fit his soul, even if they fit his body. "You clean up well," she said. "Feel like a fraud." "That makes 2 of us." They went downstairs to the hotel restaurant. Over steak and potatoes, they planned their approach. "There's 3 main bookstores in Denver," Ben said, keeping his voice low. "Harper's, which caters to the wealthy, Morrison's, which is more general, and a used bookshop called the Scholar's Corner. If Victor's trying to impress women, he'd shop at Harper's. That's where you'd find quality editions of poetry." "That's what I figured. We'll start there tomorrow." "What do we say? We can't just ask if they've sold books to a con artist. We say you're looking for a gift for your brother, someone who loves Wordsworth and Tennyson. You want to know what other customers bought similar books. Will that work? Only one way to find out." They finished eating in silence, both nervous despite their planning. This was the first real step in the hunt, the first time they'd actively pursue a lead instead of just organizing information. Margaret excused herself early, claiming exhaustion. In her room, she paced, too wound up to sleep. Tomorrow, they'd walk into a bookstore and try to track a man who'd made himself invisible. It seemed impossible, but impossible was all she had left. Another knock. She opened the door to find Ben standing there, hat in hand. "Sorry. I know it's late. Just wanted to check on you." "I'm fine." "You're pacing. I can hear it through the wall." Margaret stepped back, letting him in. "I'm nervous." "That's smart. Nervous keeps you sharp." "What if we're wrong? What if he doesn't shop at Harper's? What if he's already left Denver?" "Then we try something else. That's all we can do. Keep trying until we get it right or run out of options." "How do you live like this? Always hunting, never certain." Ben sat in the room's single chair. "You get used to it. The uncertainty becomes normal. You learn to trust your instincts instead of needing proof." "My instincts told me Victor was honest." "No, they didn't. You ignored your instincts because you wanted to believe. That's different." Margaret sat on the bed, suddenly exhausted. What if we find him? What if we're standing face to face with the man who destroyed our lives? What do? We bring him in, legal and proper. And if he runs? Ben's expression went hard. Then we run faster. You didn't answer the question. What if it comes down to you and him and there's no law around? Then I'll do what needs doing. Which is, whatever keeps him from hurting anyone else. Margaret heard the unspoken truth beneath those words. Ben would kill Victor Thorne if he had to. Maybe even if he didn't have to. 5 years of grief and rage had to go somewhere. I won't judge you, she said quietly. Whatever happens. You should. Judge me, I mean. Keep me honest. Is that what Anna did? Every day. His voice went soft. She was my conscience, kept me from becoming the worst version of myself. I'm not her. I know, but you're strong like she was. You see things clear. I don't feel strong. I feel terrified and angry and completely out of my depth. Ben stood crossing to where she sat. He hesitated, then sat beside her on the bed, a breach of propriety that somehow felt right. When I found Anna's body, I wanted to die too. Couldn't see no reason to keep going when everything I loved was gone. Silas literally had to take my gun away for 3 days. He stared at his hands. But then I read her letter, and she said she hoped I'd find a way to be happy again someday. Not right away, but someday. Have you found happiness? Don't know, but I found purpose. And lately, he stopped. Lately, what? Lately, I've been thinking, maybe purpose ain't enough. Maybe Anna was right that I should want more than just revenge. Margaret's heart was beating too fast. What would more look like? Ben turned to look at her. I got no idea. Ain't thought past catching Thorne in 5 years. They sat in silence, shoulders touching the air between them, charged with something neither was ready to name. We should sleep, Margaret finally said, though she didn't move. Yeah, but Ben didn't move either. They sat there like two people afraid that standing up would break something fragile and new. Finally, Ben stood. Tomorrow. We start at Harper's soon as they open. Tomorrow. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Margaret lay awake for hours thinking about purpose and happiness and the way Ben's shoulder had felt solid and warm against hers. She was falling for him. Despite everything, the grief, the mission, the impossibility of it all, she was falling for Benjamin Sawyer. It was the worst possible timing, and she couldn't seem to stop. Harper's Books occupied a corner building on 16th Street, its windows displaying leather-bound volumes and gilt-edged pages. Margaret straightened her dress, took a breath, and pushed through the door. The shop smelled of paper and leather and old wood. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, packed with books organized by subject. A man in spectacles looked up from behind the counter. Good morning. May I help you? Margaret approached with what she hoped was confident ease. I'm looking for a gift for my brother. He's quite fond of poetry, Wordsworth, Tennyson, the Romantics. Excellent taste. We have a fine selection of poetry. The clerk moved toward a shelf. Is your brother local? No, he lives back east. Boston. I see. Are you shopping for a specific title or browsing? This was the tricky part. Margaret pulled Victor's letters from her reticule. He sent me this list of poets he's been reading lately. I thought if I could find something similar. She showed the clerk one of Victor's letters, the one where he'd quoted extensively from Wordsworth. The clerk adjusted his spectacles, reading. Lovely handwriting, very educated hand. Yes, my brother is quite cultured. This passage here, the world is too much with us. We sold several editions of Wordsworth last month. Let me check my records. He disappeared into a back room. Ben, who'd been browsing near the door, caught Margaret's eye. She nodded slightly. This might actually work. The clerk returned with a ledger. Yes, here we are. We sold 3 copies of Wordsworth's collected works in December. 1 to a regular customer, Mrs. Hartford. 1 to a gentleman named... He squinted. Difficult to read my own writing. Sterling. Mr. Vincent Sterling. Margaret's hands went cold. Sterling. That was one of Victor's aliases. Do you remember Mr. Sterling? She asked, keeping her voice casual. Oh yes. Charming fellow. Very well dressed. He purchased quite a lot, actually, poetry, philosophy, some novels. Must have spent $50. Is he a regular customer? I'd seen him a few times before. Always buys quality editions. Has excellent taste. Does he live in Denver? The clerk looked uncomfortable. I couldn't say, miss. We don't typically ask. Of course, my apologies. Margaret smiled. It's just that my brother mentioned a friend named Sterling living somewhere out west. I thought perhaps it was the same man. Well, Mr. Sterling did mention he traveled frequently. Business of some kind, I believe. What sort of business? He didn't specify. Now shall I show you some Wordsworth editions? Margaret purchased a small volume to maintain the pretense, then stepped outside where Ben waited. Vincent Sterling, she said quietly. He was here. $50 worth of books. When? December, less than a month ago. Ben's jaw tightened. He's close. Probably still in the area. The clerk said he travels frequently, for business. His business is conning women, which means he needs somewhere quiet to write letters, somewhere he can receive mail without attracting attention. They walked slowly down the street, both thinking. A boarding house, Margaret said. Somewhere respectable but not too expensive, where a well-dressed man wouldn't stand out. There's dozens of boarding houses in Denver, but only a few that cater to professional men. We need somewhere that offers mail service and privacy. Ben stopped walking. The Excelsior Hotel. It's on Champa Street. Caters to traveling businessmen. They hold mail for long-term guests. How do you know that? Stayed there once when I was scouting. The owner, Mrs. Blackwood, runs a tight ship. She'd remember a man like Sterling. The Excelsior was smaller than their hotel, but well-maintained. Mrs. Blackwood herself greeted them in the lobby, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner. Help you folks? Ben removed his hat. Yes, ma'am. We're looking for a friend of ours. Gentleman named Vincent Sterling. We heard he might be staying here. Mrs. Blackwood's expression closed. I don't give out information about my guests. Of course not, Margaret said quickly. We're not asking for his room number or anything improper. It's just, we were supposed to meet him for dinner last week, and he never arrived. We're worried something might have happened. Mr. Sterling checked out 2 weeks ago. Margaret's heart sank. Do you know where he went? Didn't say. Paid his bill and left. Was he alone? Ben asked. Mrs. Blackwood hesitated. I really shouldn't. Please, Margaret said. He's my brother. I haven't heard from him in weeks and I'm worried. It was a calculated lie and it worked. Mrs. Blackwood's expression softened. He had a woman with him sometimes. Young thing, dark hair. Seemed nervous. I thought maybe she was, well, I don't judge what my guests do, but she didn't look like his wife. Did you catch her name? No, she never stayed overnight, just visited during the day. After they left the hotel, Margaret turned to Ben. He had an accomplice, someone helping him here in Denver. Or another victim he was grooming. Either way, we need to find her. How? We don't even know her name. Margaret thought for a moment. The letters. Victor's letters were always mailed from small towns, but someone had to receive responses. If he was staying at the Excelsior, that's where mail would come. Mrs. Blackwood said he checked out 2 weeks ago. But his mail might still be there. Hotels hold mail for a while in case guests return. They went back. This time Ben did the talking. Mrs. Blackwood, if my sister did write to Mr. Sterling, would her letter still be here? Might be. I keep mail for 30 days before sending it back. Could you check the name would be Margaret Hartwell? Mrs. Blackwood disappeared into her office. Margaret grabbed Ben's arm. What are you doing, if my letter is there? Then we know he's planning to come back for it. And we'll be waiting. But Mrs. Blackwood returned, shaking her head. No letter for Sterling from a Hartwell. Sorry. Outside, Margaret exhaled shakily. That was reckless. That was smart. Now we know he cleaned out his mail before he left. He's not coming back here. So where did he go? North. He works in circuits, remember Denver, then north through Wyoming, eventually into Montana. We're 2 weeks behind him, but we're on his trail. 2 weeks is a lifetime. He could have already conned someone else by now. Probably has. But Margaret, we're closer than I've ever been. We have a name he's using. We have a description from the bookstore clerk. We know his pattern. This is progress. Margaret wanted to feel encouraged, but all she felt was frustrated. They'd come so close only to miss him. What if he changes his name again, becomes someone else? He will, but he'll keep the same personality, same charm, same expensive taste in books. That's what makes him good, but it's also what makes him trackable. He can't help being himself. They spent 2 more days in Denver checking other bookstores and hotels, but found nothing new. Victor Sterling, or whatever he was calling himself now, had vanished north, leaving only traces of expensive taste and broken hearts. On their last night, they ate dinner at a small restaurant. Margaret picked at her food, discouraged. We failed. We didn't fail. We learned. He's still out there. He is. But now I know more about him than I did before. How he moves, where he shops, what he values. That matters. Does it? Or are we just fooling ourselves that we can catch someone who's been doing this for years? Ben reached across the table, covering her hand with his. Margaret, look at me. She did. His eyes were steady, certain. We're gonna catch him. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next month, but we will. Because we're smart, and we're patient, and we won't quit. That's more than most people hunting him can say. You really believe that? I have to. Otherwise, Anna died for nothing, and I spent 5 years of my life chasing wind. I got to believe it means something. Margaret turned her hand over, lacing her fingers through his. It means something. Even if we never catch him, what we're doing means something. How you figure? Because we're trying. Because we're refusing to let him make us small and afraid. That's worth something. They sat like that, hands joined across the table, and for a moment the hunt didn't matter. The rage didn't matter. All that mattered was this: 2 people who understood each other's pain, trying to make something good from something broken. We should head back to the ranch tomorrow, Ben said quietly. Regroup. Figure out our next move. All right. But neither of them moved. They stayed at that table until the restaurant started closing, reluctant to let go. Reluctant to return to separate rooms and separate thoughts. When they finally climbed the stairs to their floor, Ben walked Margaret to her door. Thank you, she said, for bringing me to Denver, for trusting me to help. Thank you for giving me hope again. Been a long time since I felt like this was actually possible. They stood in the hallway, the space between them charged with everything they weren't saying. Ben raised his hand, hesitated, then gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Good night, Margaret. Good night, Ben. She went inside and closed the door, leaning against it, her heart racing. She could still feel the ghost of his touch against her cheek. This was dangerous, more dangerous than hunting Victor. Because catching Victor might fail, but falling for Ben, that would change everything. And she didn't know if she was brave enough for that kind of change. But she was starting to think she might not have a choice. The ride back to the ranch took 4 days instead of 3. Snow started falling on the second day, heavy and relentless, forcing them to take shelter in a line shack Ben knew about. It was barely more than 4 walls and a roof, but it had a stove and firewood stacked against the wall. We'll wait out the worst of it, Ben said, tending to the horses. Should clear by morning. But it didn't clear. The snow fell harder, wind howling through cracks in the walls. By nightfall, they were trapped. Margaret sat close to the stove, wrapped in every blanket they had. Ben paced, restless and frustrated. Stop, she finally said. You're making me nervous. Sorry, I don't like being stuck. Neither do I, but pacing won't change the weather. He sat across from her, their knees almost touching in the small space. The stove cast flickering shadows across his face. Tell me something, Margaret said. Something I don't know about you. Why? Because we've been hunting together for weeks, and I feel like I know the hunter, but not the man. Ben was quiet for a long moment. What you want to know? Anything. What did you want to be when you were young before all this? A horse trainer. Not breaking horses for work, training them for show. Dressage jumping. Fancy stuff rich people pay for. Margaret smiled. That's not what I expected. Why not? You seem so practical. Training show horses sounds almost frivolous. It ain't frivolous to the horse. Teaching them to trust, to move with grace instead of fear, that's art. He looked at his hands. Anna used to say I was gentle with horses because I understood what it was like to be broken. Were you broken? My pa had a heavy hand. Thought beating sense into kids was good parenting. By the time I was 12, I was big enough to hit back. Left home at 14. I'm sorry. Don't be. Made me who I am. And who is that? Ben met her eyes. Still figuring it out. They sat in silence, the wind screaming outside. Margaret wanted to reach for him to close the distance between them, but fear held her back. Fear of being rejected. Fear of complicating things. Fear of wanting something she might not be allowed to have. Your turn, Ben said. Tell me something I don't know. I almost got married once, before Victor. His eyebrows rose. What happened? I was 23. He was a banker's son, very respectable. Our families approved. Everything was arranged. Margaret pulled the blanket tighter. 2 weeks before the wedding, I overheard him talking to his friend, laughing about how boring I was, how he was marrying me for my modest inheritance and my ability to manage a household, not because he loved me. Jesus, what did you do? Canceled the wedding, gave back the ring, endured 6 months of my family telling me I'd ruined my prospects. They were wrong. Were they? I'm 26, unmarried, broke, hunting a con man in Montana. Not exactly a success story. You're alive. You're fighting. That's more than most people can say. Margaret looked at him, really looked at him. Do you ever wonder what your life would be like if Anna hadn't died? If you'd just stayed a rancher? Every day. But wondering don't change nothing. Would you go back if you could? Ben considered the question seriously. I'd go back to save Anna and Rose in a heartbeat. But if you're asking would I go back to who I was before, man who only cared about his ranch and his family and nothing beyond that, I don't know. Losing them broke me, but it also opened my eyes, made me see how much suffering there is, how many people need help. That's a generous way to look at tragedy. It's the only way I can live with it. The wind shifted, blowing smoke back down the chimney. Ben adjusted the flue, muttering about cheap construction. Margaret watched him work, noting the careful precision in his movements. Everything he did was deliberate, controlled, like he was afraid that if he moved too fast or too carelessly, something else might break. Ben. Yeah. When we catch Victor, if we catch him, what happens after? He goes to jail. We testify. Justice gets served. No, I mean with us. What happens with us? Ben stilled. I don't know. Haven't let myself think that far. Why not? Because hoping is dangerous. Rather focus on the work. That's a lonely way to live. It's a safe way to live. Margaret stood, crossed the small space, and sat beside him. Their shoulders touched, and she felt him tense. I don't want safe anymore, she said quietly. Safe is what made me vulnerable to Victor. I was so busy being careful, being proper, protecting myself from risk, that I couldn't see danger when it was staring me in the face. That ain't your fault. I know. But I'm done hiding from life, because I'm afraid of getting hurt again. Ben turned to look at her. What are you saying? I'm saying I care about you, more than I should, more than is smart or convenient or appropriate, and I know this is terrible timing, and I know we're both damaged, and I know nothing about this makes sense. He kissed her. It was sudden and fierce, and nothing like she'd imagined. His hand cupped her face, rough and gentle at the same time. She made a sound surprise or relief, she wasn't sure, and kissed him back. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Ben rested his forehead against hers. I care about you too. Been trying not to, but I do. Why try not to? Because everyone I care about dies or leaves or gets hurt. I'm cursed, Margaret. Bad luck follows me. That's not how luck works. Feels like it. Or maybe you've had terrible things happen and you're still here fighting. That's not bad luck. That's strength. Ben pulled back enough to see her face. You really believe that? I believe we've both survived things that should have destroyed us. I believe we found each other when we needed it most. And I believe that if we catch Victor Thorne, it won't fill the holes in our lives, but maybe we can fill them for each other. That's a lot of believing. Do you have a better option? He smiled, then really smiled, and it transformed his whole face. No, ma'am. Can't say I do. They stayed close, wrapped in blankets, talking until the fire burned low. About Anna and the life Ben had lost. About Margaret's parents and the loneliness that had driven her west. About fear and hope and the strange alchemy that turned grief into purpose. If we do this, Ben said eventually, if we try to be something more than partners, you need to know I'm broken. I got nightmares. I wake up swinging sometimes. I'm gone for days or weeks when I get a lead on Thorne. I ain't easy. I don't need easy. I need honest. I can do honest. Then that's enough. They slept that night curled together for warmth, platonic but intimate. When Margaret woke at dawn, she found Ben already up stoking the fire. The snow had stopped, leaving the world buried in white silence. We can move, he said. If we go slow. They packed up and rode out into a landscape transformed. Everything was white and clean, all the old tracks buried, starting fresh. Margaret took it as an omen. They reached the ranch 2 days later. Silas met them at the barn, relief clear on his weathered face. About time. Was starting to think you'd frozen to death. Almost did, Ben said, dismounting. Got trapped in the line shack for a day. Silas's eyes flicked between them, noting something different. That right? Well, you both look healthy enough. We are, Margaret said, and felt her cheeks warm at the knowing look Silas gave her. Inside the house felt smaller than Margaret remembered, more intimate. Ben helped her with her coat, his hand lingering on her shoulder. I'll make coffee, Silas said, disappearing into the kitchen with uncharacteristic tact. Ben turned to Margaret. We should talk about Denver, make a plan for what's next. Now, before I lose my nerve. They sat at the table with coffee and Ben's maps. He'd been tracking Victor's movements for 5 years, marking every confirmed sighting, every con, every town. The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. He's heading north, Ben said, tracing the route with his finger. Denver to Cheyenne to Laramie, Margaret finished. He'll hit Laramie next. It's the right size, big enough for mail service, small enough to avoid attention. That's what I'm thinking, but it's a guess. He could go anywhere. No, he couldn't. Look at his pattern. He needs certain things. Mail service, yes, but also access to wealthy marks. Laramie has both. It's got the railroad, which means women traveling through, and it's got ranchers and merchants with money to steal. Silas returned with more coffee. You two planning to ride out again? Maybe, Ben said. Depends if we can get ahead of him. And if we can find more evidence, Margaret added. One clerk remembering a man named Sterling isn't enough for an arrest. What would be enough? Silas asked. Multiple witnesses. Documentation. A woman willing to testify that he conned her recently. Margaret thought for a moment. Or catching him in the act. Ben's expression went hard. That means letting him start a new con. Letting him hurt someone else. No, it means finding someone he's already targeting and protecting her while we gather evidence. We can't arrest him for crimes he might commit. We need proof of what he's done. She's right, Silas said. Much as it pains me to say it. They spent the afternoon planning. Margaret would write letters to postmasters in Laramie and surrounding towns asking if anyone had received mail for Vincent Sterling. Ben would contact a Pinkerton agent he knew in Cheyenne, see if there'd been any reports of fraud matching Victor's pattern. It's slow work, Margaret said, frustrated. Hunting always is. You track, you wait, you move when the opportunity comes. I don't have a hunter's patience. You got an accountant's patience, which is almost the same thing. You can sit with numbers for hours. This ain't different, we're just tracking a different kind of pattern. That night, after Silas had retired to the bunkhouse, Margaret and Ben sat by the fire. The house was quiet, except for the crackle of burning wood and the wind outside. What happens if we catch him? Margaret asked. I mean, really, what happens to us? What do you want to happen? I don't know. A month ago, I couldn't see past my anger. Now I'm sitting here thinking about after, and I don't know what that looks like. Ben took her hand. Could look like this. You and me, the ranch, may be helping other folks who get conned. We got the space, the resources. Could turn it into something good. A sanctuary for victims. Something like that. Give people a place to land while they figure out what's next. Margaret turned the idea over in her mind. That would take money we don't have. Maybe. Or maybe we don't need much. Just a safe place and someone willing to help. We already got both. You've been thinking about this. Been thinking about a lot of things lately. He squeezed her hand. Been thinking maybe revenge ain't enough anymore. Maybe I want something more. What do you want? Ben looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. I want to stop hunting ghosts and start living. I want to wake up without that weight on my chest. I want... He stopped, searching for words. I want to be happy again. And I think maybe you could help with that. That's a lot of pressure. I know. That's why I'm scared to say it. Margaret leaned in and kissed him soft and slow. When she pulled back, she said, I want those things too. But we have to finish this first. We have to see it through. I know. And after, if there is an after, we figure it out together. Together. I like the sound of that. They sat by the fire until it burned to embers, talking about possibilities and futures and all the things they'd stopped letting themselves hope for. It was the most dangerous thing Margaret had done since leaving Philadelphia, more dangerous than hunting Victor, more dangerous than admitting her feelings. Hope was dangerous, but maybe that was the point. The next week brought letters. The postmaster in Laramie had received mail for a Mr. Vincent Sterling at the Laramie Hotel. The Pinkerton agent in Cheyenne reported 2 women had filed complaints about a man matching Victor's description, one in Fort Collins, one in Boulder. Both cases had been dismissed for lack of evidence. He's getting bolder, Margaret said, reading the reports. 2 women in 2 months. He's speeding up his cycle. Or getting desperate. Maybe his money's running out. Do con men run out of money? The stupid ones do. The smart ones invest their takings, make it last. But if Victor's been doing this for years without getting caught, maybe he started feeling invincible, started taking bigger risks. Margaret studied the map. Fort Collins and Boulder are both south of Laramie. If he's working his way north, he's in Laramie now, or he will be soon. Ben stood decisive. We ride out tomorrow. Just us. Just us. Silas needs to stay and manage the ranch. Ben, if Victor is there, if we confront him. We won't confront him. We'll watch, gather evidence, wait for the right moment. He met her eyes. I know I got a reputation for being reckless, but I ain't stupid. We do this smart, or we don't do it at all. They left at dawn, supplies packed for a week or more. Silas watched them go with worry clear on his face. You be careful, he called. Both of you. The ride to Laramie took 3 days. They arrived on a Wednesday, the town busy with railroad traffic and commerce. The Laramie Hotel was a respectable establishment on the main street, 3 stories of brick and glass. Ben took rooms under the name John Carter and wife. The clerk didn't blink, just handed over keys and pointed them upstairs. "Why'd you say wife?" Margaret asked when they were alone in the hallway. "Cheaper, and people don't ask questions about married couples." "But we're not." "I know, but nobody here knows that." They were given adjoining rooms with a connecting door. Margaret unpacked while Ben went to question the clerk about Vincent Sterling. When he returned, his expression was grim. "He's here. Checked in 5 days ago. Room 312. Margaret's heart started racing. "What do? We watch. See who visits him, where he goes, who he talks to. We build a case. And if he's actively conning someone right now, then we figure out who, and we protect her while gathering evidence against him." It sounded simple, but Margaret knew it wouldn't be. They spent 2 days watching the hotel. Victor Vincent Sterling, as he was calling himself, kept a regular schedule. Breakfast in the hotel restaurant at 8. Out until noon. Lunch at a cafe down the street. More time out then, back to the hotel by evening. "He's working," Ben said. "Meeting someone, building a con." On the 3rd day, they followed him. He went to a boarding house on the edge of town and knocked on a door. A woman answered, young, maybe 25, blonde hair pinned up neat. She smiled when she saw him stepping back to let him in. Margaret and Ben watched from across the street. "That's her," Margaret said. "His current mark." "We don't know that for sure." "Yes, we do. Look at her face. She's excited to see him. Nervous but hopeful. I know that expression. I wore it myself 3 months ago." Ben's jaw tightened. "So we wait for him to leave, then we talk to her. And say what? Hello, the man you're falling for is a con artist. She won't believe us. I wouldn't have." "Then what?" Margaret thought fast. "We need proof. Something she can't deny. Letters from other victims. Documentation of his other identities. We need to make it impossible for her to ignore the truth." "That'll take time." "Then we make time. But Ben, we can't let him take her money. We have to protect her somehow." They waited outside until Victor emerged an hour later, looking pleased with himself. After he disappeared back toward the hotel, Margaret approached the boarding house and knocked. The woman answered, her smile fading when she saw strangers. "May I help you?" "I hope so. My name is Margaret Hartwell. This is my friend Ben Sawyer. We need to talk to you about Vincent Sterling." The woman's expression shuddered. "I don't know anyone by that name." "Please, just give us 5 minutes. I'm not interested in whatever you're selling." "We're not selling anything. We're trying to help you." The woman started to close the door. Margaret spoke quickly, desperately. "He quotes Wordsworth. He talks about building a future together. He needs money for something, ranch improvements, business investment, something urgent. And he makes you feel special, like you're the only person who understands him." The woman froze. "How do you—" "Because he did the same thing to me 3 months ago, and to at least 20 other women before that. His real name isn't Vincent Sterling. We don't actually know his real name, but we know he's a con artist, and we know he's going to take your money and disappear." The woman, her name was Sarah Bennett, let them in. Her small room was neat, organized with letters stacked on a writing desk. Margaret recognized the handwriting immediately. "How long have you been corresponding with him?" she asked. 8 months. He's a mining investor. He came to town scouting properties." Sarah's voice was defensive. "We've been courting. He's asked me to marry him." "Has he asked you for money?" Ben said. "He needs investors for a claim. It's a legitimate business opportunity." "How much?" Sarah hesitated. $600. "Have you given it to him yet?" "Not yet. I'm selling my mother's jewelry to raise the funds. It should be ready by the end of the week." Margaret and Ben exchanged glances. They had maybe 4 days before Sarah's money was ready, and Victor disappeared with it. "Sarah, I know this is hard to hear," Margaret said gently. "But Vincent Sterling has done this before, many times, to many women. I can prove it if you'll give me a chance." "Why should I believe you? I don't even know you." "Because I was you 3 months ago. waiting at a stage station for a man named Victor Thorne who never showed up. He took my entire inheritance and left me with nothing. Something in Margaret's voice must have convinced her because Sarah's defenses cracked slightly. Do you have proof? Letters, documentation, and I can get more. Just please don't give him any money until you see what we have. That's all I'm asking. Sarah nodded slowly. End of the week. I'll wait until then. Thank you. They left quickly before Victor might return. Back at the hotel, Margaret collapsed into a chair. We need more evidence. Fast. I'll send telegrams, Ben said. Contact every Pinkerton office in the territory. Get statements from the women who filed complaints. That'll take days. It's all we got. For the next 3 days, they worked frantically. Ben sent telegrams and received responses. Margaret organized everything into a timeline documenting Victor's movements and crimes across 5 years. They tracked down a woman in Fort Collins who'd been conned 2 months earlier. She agreed to provide a written statement. On Friday morning, they had enough. Statements from 4 women, documentation of 5 different aliases, and Ben's own testimony about Anna's death. It wasn't perfect, but it was substantial. They went to Sarah's boarding house and showed her everything. She read through it all in silence, her face going pale. He told me I was special, she finally said. You are special, Margaret said. That's why he picked you. He doesn't target weak women. He targets strong, smart, capable women because they're worth more to him. I feel like an idiot. Don't. He's a professional predator. This is what he does. Sarah set down the papers. What happens now? Now we catch him, Ben said. And you help us do it. Sarah agreed to help, though her hands shook as she said it. The plan was simple. She'd meet Victor as scheduled, pretend to have the money ready, and when he made his move to take it, Ben would step in with the local marshal. Clean legal, impossible to dismiss. What if he suspects something? Sarah asked. Then you tell him you need more time, Margaret said. But he won't suspect. Men like him are so confident in their abilities they can't imagine being outsmarted. I don't know if I can do this. Lie to his face. You're not lying. You're acting. There's a difference. Ben had already spoken with Marshal Crenshaw, a weathered man in his 50s, who'd been skeptical until he saw the evidence. 4 women, 5 aliases, a pattern spanning years. Even then, he'd been reluctant. Con games are hard to prosecute, Crenshaw had said. Lawyers will argue it was gifts, not theft. Then we make sure there's no room for argument, Ben had replied. We catch him in the act with witnesses. Now they waited. Sarah was meeting Victor at 2 o'clock at a cafe near the railroad station. Margaret and Ben would be there watching from separate tables. Marshal Crenshaw would be outside with a deputy. Margaret dressed carefully that morning, choosing her plainest dress. Nothing that would draw attention. Ben checked his gun twice, then holstered it under his coat. You ready? He asked. No, but I'm going anyway. They arrived at the cafe separately. Margaret took a table by the window with a book she didn't read. Ben sat at the counter, hat pulled low. The cafe filled with the lunch crowd, railroad workers, merchants, a few women doing shopping. At exactly 2 o'clock, Sarah entered. She looked pale, but composed. She ordered tea and sat at a corner table waiting. 10 minutes later, Victor walked in. Margaret's breath caught. This was the first time she'd seen him in person, the man who'd destroyed her life with nothing but words and promises. He was handsome, she'd give him that. Well-dressed, confident, moving through the room like he owned it. Everything about him screamed respectability and success. He spotted Sarah, and his face lit up with practiced warmth. Sarah, my dear, I'm sorry I'm late. It's fine, I was just early. He sat across from her, taking her hands. You look troubled. Is something wrong? No, I need to talk to you about the investment. Victor's expression shifted to concern. Of course. Have you changed your mind? No, but I need more time. The jewelry hasn't sold yet. Another week, maybe 2. Margaret watched carefully. This was the moment. Would he press? Or would he give her space? Take all the time you need, Victor said smoothly. I don't want you to feel rushed. This is an important decision. Sarah relaxed slightly. Thank you. I was worried you'd be disappointed. Disappointed, Sarah? I care about you. The investment matters, yes, but not as much as you do. It was masterful, the perfect balance of understanding and subtle pressure. Margaret felt sick watching it. Actually, Sarah continued, her voice steadying. I wanted to ask you something about your previous investments. Victor's smile didn't falter. What would you like to know? You mentioned you'd worked with several partners before. May I contact them for references? The question hung in the air. Margaret held her breath. Of course, Victor said without hesitation. Though most of my previous partners are back east, the mail takes time. I don't mind waiting. Sarah, Victor's voice took on a wounded edge. Do you not trust me? I do. My mother always said to be careful with business matters. Your mother was wise. But darling, we're not just business partners. We're building a life together. Trust has to start somewhere. Margaret saw Sarah waver. Victor was good, so good at reading people, at knowing exactly what to say. She needed to intervene before Sarah crumbled. She stood, walked to their table. Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't help overhearing. Did you say your name was Vincent Sterling? Victor looked up, his expression polite but wary. Yes. Do we know each other? No, but I know several women who've done business with men using that name. Or was it Victor Thorne? Or Vincent Cross? I get confused with all the aliases. The color drained from Victor's face. Sarah pulled her hands away from his. I'm sorry, who are you? Victor said, standing. Someone you stole from, along with at least 23 others. Ben was already moving, blocking the exit. Victor's eyes darted between them, calculating odds. I don't know what you're talking about. Sarah, this woman is clearly disturbed. She's not, Sarah said quietly. I've seen the evidence. Letters from other women, documentation of your cons. I know what you are. Then you're a fool for believing strangers over me. Victor's mask slipped, revealing cold contempt underneath. I've given you nothing but attention and affection, and this is how you repay me. You've given me lies, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. And you were about to take $600 that you didn't earn and didn't deserve. Victor moved fast, shoving past Margaret toward the back door, but Ben was faster. He grabbed Victor's arm, spun him around, and slammed him against the wall. U.S. Marshal's office wants a word with you, Ben said. Marshal Crenshaw entered with his deputy. Vincent Sterling, you're under arrest for fraud and theft by deception. On what grounds? I haven't taken anything from anyone. You got a hotel room full of letters from women, Crenshaw said. Letters asking for money back, begging you to explain why you disappeared. We got statements from 4 victims willing to testify, and we got you caught in the act of conning Miss Bennett here. I didn't take her money? No, because we stopped you first. Victor's expression went blank. No charm, no warmth, just calculation. Get me a lawyer. Don't say anything else to these people. As the marshal led him out in handcuffs, Victor's eyes found Margaret's. You think this changes anything? I'll be out in a week. My lawyers are better than whatever backwater law you think you have. Maybe, Margaret said. But everyone will know what you are now. Every woman you try to con will hear your name and know to run. You're done. You naive fool. There's always another town. Always another woman desperate enough to believe. Not if we make sure everyone knows. Not if we tell your story everywhere you go. Victor laughed. You can't follow me forever. No, Ben said, stepping forward. But I can, and I will. Every town you visit, every woman you target, I'll be there. Warning them, protecting them. You took my wife and daughter from me. I got nothing but time and rage, and I'm putting both into making sure you never hurt anyone again. Something flickered in Victor's eyes, then not fear exactly, but recognition. He was looking at a man with nothing to lose and everything to avenge. Marshal Crenshaw pulled him toward the door. "Come on, cell's waiting." After they left, the cafe erupted in whispers. Margaret sat down heavily, her legs suddenly weak. "It's over," Sarah said. "It's really over." "For you, maybe," Margaret replied. "For me, this is just starting." They spent the next 3 days in Laramie. The marshal needed statements from everyone involved. A lawyer arrived from Denver, Victor's lawyer, expensive and smooth. He tried to get the charges dismissed, arguing that no actual theft had occurred, but Marshal Crenshaw held firm. Attempted theft is still a crime, and we got 4 other victims willing to testify about completed thefts in other jurisdictions. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out. Victor would stay in jail until then, unable to post the high bail the judge set. On their last night in Laramie, Margaret and Ben walked through the quiet streets. Snow was falling again, soft and gentle. "We did it," Margaret said. "We actually caught him. We started to catch him. Still got to make the charges stick. They'll stick. We have too much evidence." Ben stopped walking, turned to face her. "What happens now, after the trial?" "I don't know. I haven't let myself think past this moment." "Maybe it's time to start thinking." Margaret looked up at him, snow catching in her hair. "What do you want to happen?" "I want to go home, to the ranch, and I want you there with me, not as my bookkeeper or my partner in hunting, as someone who matters, someone I'm building a life with." "Ben, I know it's fast. I know we're both damaged, and this is probably a terrible idea. But I'm done being careful, done protecting myself from feeling things. You make me want to hope again, Margaret. That's worth risking everything for." Margaret felt tears start. "I want that too. I'm terrified, but I want it." "Then we'll be terrified together." He kissed her there in the falling snow, and for the first time since she'd sat on that bench in Clayton Station, waiting for a man who would never come, Margaret felt something like peace. The trial happened in February. Victor's lawyers fought hard, but the evidence was overwhelming. 4 women testified about his cons. Ben presented documentation of 5 different aliases. Margaret took the stand and walked the jury through Victor's methods, the poetry, the philosophy, the carefully crafted vulnerability. "He makes you feel special," she said, "like you're the only person who truly understands him. And when you believe that, when you've invested your emotions and your trust, that's when he asks for money. Not as a con, but as a partnership, as proof that you believe in him the way he claims to believe in you." The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood. "On all counts, we find the defendant guilty." Victor showed no emotion as the judge sentenced him to 15 years hard labor. But as the marshal let him out, he looked at Margaret one last time. "You think you won," he said quietly. "But you're still broken. I did that. Nothing changes that." Margaret stood. "You're right. You did break me. But I put myself back together into something stronger than I was before. That's what you'll never understand, that the women you hurt don't stay victims forever. We heal. We grow. We become dangerous to men like you." "Dangerous?" Victor scoffed. "You're a woman with no money and no prospects in love with a broken man who's still mourning his dead wife. That's not dangerous. That's pathetic." Ben stepped forward, his hand on his gun. Marshal Crenshaw grabbed his arm. "He's not worth it," Crenshaw said. "No," Margaret said, her voice cutting. "He's not. He's just a small, sad man who steals from women because he's too weak to build anything real. And now everyone knows it. That's worse than any beating you could give him, Ben. He'll spend 15 years being known as exactly what he is." They took Victor away then, and Margaret felt something release in her chest. Not joy exactly, but closure. The man who'd stolen her money and her dignity was going to prison. That didn't fix everything, but it fixed something. Outside the courthouse, Sarah Bennett waited with two other women victims who'd come to watch the trial. They hugged Margaret, crying and thanking her. "You gave us justice," one said. "No," Margaret replied. "We gave each other justice. We stood together and refused to be silent. That's what made the difference." She and Ben left Laramie that afternoon, riding toward the ranch through winter sunshine. The snow had started melting, revealing brown earth beneath. Spring was coming. "What do we do now?" Margaret asked. "We spent months hunting Victor. What do we do when that's over?" "We live," Ben said simply. "We run the ranch. We help other folks who need it. We figure out what happy looks like." "That sounds almost normal." "Is that bad?" "No, it sounds perfect." They reached the ranch at sunset. Silas met them at the barn, relief clear on his weathered face. "About damn time. How'd it go?" 15 years, Ben said. "He's done." "Good. Now maybe you can focus on living instead of hunting." "That's the plan." Silas looked between them, noting how close they stood, how Ben's hand rested on Margaret's back. "About time for that, too," he said gruffly. "Anna would approve." Ben's eyes went bright. "You think so?" "I know so. She wanted you happy. This." He gestured at Margaret. "This is happy." That night, Margaret stood on the porch watching stars emerge. Ben joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Cold out here." "I like the cold now. Reminds me I survived it." "You did more than survive. You fought back." "We fought back," Margaret corrected. "Couldn't have done it alone." They stood in comfortable silence, drinking coffee and watching the sky darken. "I want to do something," Margaret said eventually. "With the ranch. Something that matters." "Like what?" "Help other women who've been conned or left stranded. Give them a place to land while they figure out what's next. We have the space." Ben considered it. "We'd need help. Can't do it alone." Sarah offered. Said she wants to use her experience to help others. And there's women from the trial, some of them have nowhere to go. "So we build something, a haven." "Yes, exactly that." Ben pulled her close, his arm around her shoulders. "Then that's what we'll do. Build something good from all this pain." Spring came slowly to Montana. Snow melted, revealing dead grass that would green up soon. The ranch came alive with workfoles, being born, fences needing repair. 100 tasks that marked the turning of seasons. Sarah Bennett arrived in March with 2 other women from Victor's trial. They turned the guest room into dormitories, built a second bunkhouse, started a garden. Margaret taught them bookkeeping and basic ranching. Ben and Silas taught them to ride and shoot and survive. By summer, they had 7 women staying at the ranch. Some moved on after a few months, having saved enough money and regained enough confidence to start fresh elsewhere. Others stayed, finding purpose in helping new arrivals. Margaret kept detailed records, not just financial, but personal. Every woman's story, every letter from Victor or men like him, every lesson learned. She was building something larger than just a refuge. She was building evidence that these cons happened, that they mattered, that women weren't foolish for believing lies told by professionals. One evening in July, she sat on the porch going through the latest letters. Ben joined her, his workday done. "You're obsessing again." "I'm documenting. There's a difference." "You've been documenting for 3 hours." Margaret set down her pencil. "A woman in Cheyenne wrote to me. Victor conned her 2 years ago. She saw the trial coverage in the newspaper and wanted to share her story." "Ben, there's so many of them, more than we ever knew." "Can't save everyone." "I know. But we can tell their stories. Make sure people know this happens. That might save someone." Ben took her hand. "You know what Anna used to say? She'd say, you can't carry the whole world's pain. You'll break under the weight." "I'm not trying to carry it all, just my share." "Your share is healing yourself, helping the women here, building a life. That's enough, Margaret." She leaned against him. "Is it though? Victor's in prison, but there's others like him. Other men conning women who are lonely or desperate or just human enough to believe in love. There'll always be bad men. You can't stop all of them. No, but I can make sure their victims know they're not alone. That became Margaret's mission. She wrote to newspapers, sharing stories from the women at the ranch. She corresponded with other victims across the territory. She built a network of women who'd survived cons, who could warn others, who could offer support. It wasn't the life she'd imagined when she left Philadelphia, but it was a good life, a meaningful one. In September, Ben asked her to marry him properly. Not out of convenience or propriety, but because he loved her. Because he wanted to wake up beside her for the rest of his life. Margaret said yes without hesitation. They married in October, a small ceremony at the ranch with Silas officiating and the women of their household bearing witness. Margaret wore a simple blue dress, not white, not pretending to be something she wasn't. Ben wore his good suit and smiled more than anyone had seen him smile in 5 years. After the ceremony, they stood together watching the sun set over the mountains. "You ever regret it?" Ben asked. "Coming west, all the pain that came with it." Margaret thought about the question honestly. "I regret trusting Victor. I regret losing my inheritance. But I don't regret coming west. If I hadn't, I'd have lived my whole life safe and small and alone. This." She gestured at the ranch, the women working in the garden, the life they'd built. "This is worth every hard moment. Even the waiting. Those 4 days on the bench. Especially those. That's when I learned I was stronger than I knew. That's when everything changed. Because I rode up and said no more waiting." Margaret laughed. "You were very dramatic about it." "Seemed like the right thing to say." "It was. I needed someone to tell me it was time to stop waiting and start fighting." Ben pulled her close. "You taught me something too. Taught me that healing doesn't mean forgetting, that you can honor what you lost while still building something new. Anna would be proud of you. She'd be proud of us. This place, what we're doing, this is what she wanted. People helping people, community instead of isolation." They stood there as the sky turned gold and pink and purple, watching their hard-won peace settle over the land like a blessing. Margaret thought about that woman she'd been sitting on a frozen bench in Clayton Station with $43 and no hope. That woman had believed she was finished, that Victor Thorne had taken everything that mattered. She'd been wrong. Victor had taken money and time and dignity, but he hadn't taken her strength, hadn't taken her ability to love or trust or fight back. Those things had been there all along, buried under fear and propriety, waiting for the right moment to emerge. That moment had come in the form of a bounty hunter with sad eyes and a mission. Together, they'd turned their pain into purpose, their rage into justice, their brokenness into something whole and new. The ranch stretched out before them, alive with possibility. Women who'd arrived broken were learning to stand tall again. Stories that had been silenced were being told. Justice that had been denied was being served one case at a time. It wasn't perfect. Some days were still hard. Margaret still had nightmares about Victor's voice, still felt echoes of shame when she thought about how easily she'd been fooled. Ben still woke some nights reaching for Anna, still carried grief that would never fully heal. But they had each other. They had purpose. They had proof that survival was possible, that growth came from pain, that justice, while slow, could be achieved. And they had this moment standing together on land they'd fought to keep, building something good from the wreckage of their pasts. "No more waiting," Margaret said, quietly echoing Ben's words from that first day. "No more waiting," he agreed. They turned and walked back to the house hand in hand, ready for whatever came next. The hunt was over, the healing had begun, and the future, uncertain but hopeful, stretched before them like an open road. Margaret had come west looking for a husband and found something better herself. She'd come believing in pretty lies and learned to value hard truths. She'd come alone and built a family from survivors and fighters and women who refused to stay broken. Victor Thorne had tried to destroy her. Instead, he'd forged her into something stronger, sharper, more dangerous to men like him than he could ever have imagined. That was the real victory. Not the prison sentence or the trial or the justice served. The real victory was standing here whole and happy, proving that women who were broken could heal. That victims could become warriors. That winter always gave way to spring. The sun disappeared behind the mountains and Margaret Sawyer no longer. Hartwell, no longer lost, walked into her home, knowing exactly who she was and what she'd become. A survivor, a fighter. A woman who'd stopped waiting for her life to begin and had seized it with both hands, building something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal. And that she thought was worth everything she'd endured to get here.